Hey now, welcome to the dirty side of the track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. It's the off week between Canada and Spain. And man, it still feels good. I feel like I'm riding a high from that Montreal Grand Prix, even though it wasn't there this year. I mean, how are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing okay. It's just kind of hit me that this is the last time that we record together for a while. Ah. Yes, no, it was great. We'll get to the back to the reason why Brian's not around for a few weeks shortly. But yeah, looking back, Canada was great. Recording with you in your basement was great. Uh, Drinking beer and not editing out the bit where I went to the fridge to go get more beer. I thought I'd left leave that in. It was more authentic. It was a good day. I still find it quite hilarious that the burger that I had at Landmark was called the Montreal Burger. So, I mean, that couldn't have been more perfect. So
That is true. That is true.
yeah, yeah, all good. So then, yeah, it's an off week. About 10 days ago, maybe not sure now. We recorded with Mark Schofield, former lawyer turned journalist. Covering both NFL and F1, and it was an amazing chat with him. So that'll be coming up after we do the
Absolutely the
news and
best. You
social.
definitely want to
Oh,
stick around for that. He is top notch. Rob and I had a blast.
yeah, and we're gonna have to get him back on again because he was amazing. So we'll do news and social, video vault, listen to Mark, and then we will preview Spain, of which will be reviewed by me plus someone to be revealed as Brian heads off for his European adventure. So anyway, we'll get there. Now we might still be thinking that Canada was great and the race left us with a great feeling, but there's been a whole bunch of things coming out over the past few days about things that didn't go so great in Canada. I didn't know this one. Fans were apparently held back on the bridge and not let in through the ticket area because they were told by staff that FP1 and FP2 had been cancelled due to bad weather, which wasn't true at all.
I saw this a couple days after the practices, so in the race weekend, and I didn't know if it was real or not. But then I saw a lot of it come out, as you say, kind of after the race. Yeah, that's first of all. We just say when the weather's bad, the last place you want to be held is on that bridge.
Oh yeah,
Like,
Bridge of
they're-
Death.
exactly. I mean, you are just hanging over the St. Lawrence, praying that the wind doesn't get too bad, and there's no structure to hide under. So when the hail comes and they close security, there's nowhere to go. So yeah, that was bad, but I think it actually gets worse if we kind of keep going with these stories.
Yeah, it does. I saw the actual video that Kim Illman posted. I don't know if you saw the video,
I did,
but
I did.
oh my gosh, we were talking about how general admission isn't the best view, really. And even if you can find a good spot, you'll have to get there about 16 hours before the race starts and be prepared not to move all day because someone will take your spot. Anyway, someone got a decent spot near the start finish line, and they'd been there for hours, kind of getting ready. And all of a sudden, some staff came along and start stapling up that great mesh that we came to love to hate to obstruct any view you might want of this thing you've paid to watch.
I saw this. So this was on Sunday. The backstory I read as well was that it was open on Friday and Saturday and Sunday morning. So people thought these are like the great place to be. And as you say, just before the race, they start rolling the mesh over it. Now, it was the black mesh. We were familiar with the blue mesh of
Yes.
death, which unfortunately covered so much good stuff. We Wall of Champions covered, hairpin covered. I mean, anywhere you could get close, it was covered with the blue mesh. So yeah, that was crap uh,
Yeah.
that they did that.
And I don't get why. Look, people who want a seat and want a decent view will pay grandstand money. You're going to sell out the grandstands, so why fleece the general admission ticket holder so badly to basically say we've oversold? I mean, if you view it that way, I would say they've massively oversold the GA tickets because the amount of windows they could squeeze into to watch.
Not enough.
Where's everyone? Where's everyone going to watch this from? It's
I don't
nuts.
know. And it actually reminds me of Vegas last year, how they closed off any viewing areas. And then when the FP2 ran in the middle of the night with no fans, there were a couple people who were going up and down the escalator because they found one little hole through the escalator where they could see, but security wasn't letting them kind of just stop and kind of sit on this. So they had to just go up and down the escalator to watch. I mean, come on, F1. Like, let's use some common sense here.
And then the last one that was widely reported was that rain did some damage. So hospitality units were flooded, water leaked into the commentary booths and apparently damaged some equipment. And this bit, although my heart bleeds slightly, uh, VIP parking areas became muddy. Oh no!
Mud?
Oh,
Are we
not
talking about
mud!
mud? Oh my gosh, there was mud for the VIPs? Oh, I don't know how I don't know how they carried on. I'll
I
just say
wonder if
that. I don't
any
know how they
rain and
carried
mud
on.
got onto their red carpet they have to walk in on as well.
I'm sure they had someone they paid to lie down so they could step on them as they went through the mud. Um, that said, those challenges aside, and they were discussed by some of the leadership in Montreal and others, it still earned, all of us watching it, it earned the largest live U.S. television audience ever for the Canadian Grand Prix. And then 3 of the last 4 F1 races this season have set viewership records. So it's great. And it was on ABC, which was easy to get it on in the bar, even if we couldn't hear it. And so I thought, again, as a fan watching it, it was great. I'll just say this. When Rob and I went last year, mud is a charitable description of the stuff we were walking in most of the time. My shoes were destroyed. I mean, and I just kept putting them on the next day, and it worked. So, yes, the weather's bad. Yes, they hosed the GA people. Everyone's making it sound like this race was apocalyptically bad in terms of those aspects. It sounds like last year to me.
Yeah, true. I mean, I think maybe just the wrong people got caught in it and made a big news of. I
Yeah,
don't know.
except for the bridge thing. That was.
Yeah, yeah,
I know
yeah,
that
yeah.
that sounded. Yeah. Anyway,
Um, Other news. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. I was watching good old Terry from F1 Coffee Corner kind of look into this, and
friend of the show.
yeah, friend of the show. And they kind of just, I won't say they randomly have, but the FIA has updated Appendix L of its International Sporting Code, which I knew as soon as I wrote that, you'd know exactly what I was talking about because you've got the International Sporting Code
I can
memorized.
recite
Uh,
Appendix L backwards and forwards in both French and English.
wow. Well, have you learnt the new clause that they just added? Because the new clause
Yes.
they just added is for the super license that is required to drive an F1 was 18 years old, and special dispensation may be granted to certain drivers to receive one at 17. Little asterisk down the bottom if your name is Kimmy. No, that last bit's not.
Yeah, that's obviously clearly for Kimi Antonelli, and it was petitioned for it as well. And I do think there was actually some specific language to it, and I'm trying to find it now because I thought it was funny the way they phrased it, and I can't find it, so we will pretend I said something good right there. Oh, I got it. Consistently demonstrated outstanding ability and maturity in single-seater Formula Car competition was the way that the press release around the Appendix L change went. So, yes, once again, basically for Kimi. So that'll be fascinating to see. Max, switching gears, Max confirms he's had offers about competing in Le Mans. And right now, as we record this on a Saturday, because tomorrow's Father's Day and Rob and I have other things to do, they are running right now. I watched about an hour of Le Mans this morning when I got back from volunteering at my wife's charity event, and I just sat on the couch and stared. Rob, have you seen some of the drivers in the hypercar class?
Yeah, it's kind of like either a ex who's who of Formula One, or I think like people like Mick Schumacher, places that you put people that you haven't got a seat for right now. So it's kind of
Yeah,
like,
and
yeah,
IndyCar. I mean, listen to a couple of these: Alex Palou, Sebastian Bourdais, Scott Dixon. We've got. I got to scroll down. I'm just doing highlights here. Kamui Kobayashi, Nick DeVries, Sebastian Buemi. I screwed that one up. Brandon Hartley. We've got. Hold on. Callum Ilott. I wish they had a lot of onboards with Callum. Roman Grosjean. We've got Mick Schumacher, as you said. I'm surprised you haven't been watching all day. Jenson Button. Alessandro Pierguidi from last year, I got it too. Antonio Giovinazzi, Daniel Kvyat, Robert Kubica, Robert Schwartzman, Jean-Eric Verne, Stoffel Van Dorn, Paul di Resta, Jack Aitken, Felipe Drugovich. That's a lot of people with
yeah,
names we recognize, and that's
I
just
know.
the hypercar class.
And you watched the 24th of it then, did you? You sat and watched an hour.
I did. I watched a 24th of
Yeah,
it. I'm going to watch some more of it later. It's on, here in the States, it's on Max, which is the first time I've actually used my Max subscription for anything other than stupid comedy shows.
oh well, enjoy. Um, I tried once. I'm not a big endurance race guy. Maybe I'll tune in for the last 5 minutes. Who wins? Um,
Well done.
so, okay, this one's a bit of a dodgy source. It's not really being reported anywhere other than some rando website. But let's just give it a go, just in case it comes true, and then we say we broke it first. Adrian Newey has
Right.
apparently already signed his 105 million deal to join a Formula One rival, which is being kept secret. Then another website ran with it and said it's Ferrari. But I think once you've heard a rumor that he's already signed, you can just throw in any name you like, and you may or may not be true. I mean, and he may or may not have signed, but just wanted to get that. And then another rumor that was doing the rounds is Zhou has suddenly become a big contender for the Haas seat. We know that Haas have always struggled to meet the cost cap and looking for money. When Zhou apparently brings in a reported 35 to 40 million dollars from his Chinese backers.
That's a lot of
So
money.
that's a lot of money. So
That is a lot of money. And we'd always heard the rumors that it was Ollie Behrman and potentially then Ocon got involved in the mix, Magnussen a little bit. But now Joe obviously has to be taken seriously with that much funding. And it's not like he's a bad driver.
no.
So the funding and a Joe, you're like, that's not too bad.
And then just the last one before we open up the video vault where we can actually use the sound this week. Um, Although, yeah, I mean, I think the made up sound effects that we did on real time were probably better. But anyway,
Hey.
um, McLaren are the only team to have completed 100% of race laps this season. I don't know why I like that as a little stat, but a little statette. I quite enjoyed that one. I was thinking it can't be true, but it is.
I like it too. That's a good one. I had not seen that one. I wish I'd give me a heads up. I would have played some music, but I'll play some now for the video vault. The door is open. It's time to talk about videos. I have two to highlight. Number one, Valtteri Bottas hits the ice with the Montreal Canadiens. It's on the Canadiens de Montreal page. It's 5 minutes long. I loved it. He told us when he came on this pokey little podcast, in case anyone
This is Valtteri Bottas,
forgot.
and you're listening to the dirty side of the track.
And so Valtteri played some hockey with a couple guys from the Canadiens, and he had told us how much he loved ice hockey and how much he enjoyed playing. It was awesome. If you have 5 minutes, check it out. And then Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri play Pictionary on the McLaren channel, 5 minutes. This is the chemistry we usually see between these two, kind of joking around, having fun. That Wired interview from a couple weeks ago that I talked about still stands out. They had to have been like in a big rush and didn't want to be there situation,
Yeah,
that last
yeah.
Wired thing. This was great. Check it out. I really enjoyed it. I actually met a family today at this event, and they're all F1 and actually just car lovers and gearheads. They have a young son, Weston, who drives karts here in the States, in the Chicagoland area. He's had 8 races this year and been on the podium each time, so on the off chance Weston is
Nice.
listening, good job, Weston. But I kept calling him Lando because he had a McLaren hat on and he loves Lando. So,
I bet he loved that.
and
The
I asked
joke
him,
didn't get old at all.
not at all. I go, did you see this video? He said, yes. I'm like, oh, look at that. Anyway, so that was a great video, the Pictionary one. And then, of course, Lollipop Man's Canadian review is good. Feel free to always just subscribe to these instead of us putting them in the notes. And then the P1's Funniest Tweets was also fantastic. We weren't in it this time because
We didn't make it a hat trick, did we?
yeah, neither one of us had time to send a tweet in when we were watching live. But with that, unless you have a video, I'm closing her up.
No, you can close it up. I've been in your Chicago all week and barely got to do any watching of anything, so I've seen nothing. I was scrambling around, although in my 8-hour flight delay.
I cannot deny I was delighted.
Yeah, on Thursday night, I did. That's when I did a lot of these notes for the pod because I was like, well, I'm gonna have to do something if I'm sitting around for 8 hours. So
I can't believe you had an 8-hour delay. That was insane. But we didn't get a chance to do the fantasy, so let's shift gears and close this before we hear from Mark. Last week, Canadian Grand Prix was a fascinating week. Again, a lot of DNFs and a lot of people with challenges to their team. So for the Canadian Grand Prix, in first, we had Gotham SK04 from Gotham. We had Max for Strap-On Shafts 24 from Matthew. Matthew's testing the limits of what he can get through with the names. I like it, sir. Wrong Rend from Brian. The M Team from Ayal. The Lando Make Believe from Ben. In sixth, we had Leopard F1 Racing Stewart. Petronas RT from Fariz. Valtteri's Green Machine, Steven. Studio VRM.racing from Roger, and then we had a tie for 10th, and I wanted to get to 10th this week for a reason. One is it's like this with Michael Cronje, and I'm going to talk about him in a second. But more importantly, Pit Lane Paul made the top 10. Chuffing Funts, Paul F. Harris Incorporated made the top 10. Paul, that is just, you deserve this right here, Paul. That is fantastic for the guy who never pays attention.
I was going to say, what was the and I'm putting you on the spot. You might not have it. What was the top score this week?
Top score is 280. But
280, which is
but he played in the 3 times chip on Max.
Okay, so what's the next score that didn't use a 3-time?
220. Nope, they used a wild card. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's get rid of chips for a minute.
Okay, hang on.
Come on.
The best non-chip was Brian with Wrong Rend, 207.
207, so that's still a pretty decent score, 207. And then all the way down, and I wasn't even bottom with my minus 38 or whatever I got.
No, you ended up positive, barely.
Oh, did I?
I had a 131, which is pretty good. You ended up with an 18.
Oh, wow.
Very strong. 18,
so when I was reading that last week, and I thought I was on negative 38.
Yeah.
I'll take that because I thought I was going to get my first ever negative. Were there any negatives right down at the bottom?
Oh, yes. Michael, MF Coca. Michael Coca. Sorry for giving you a full name shout out, buddy, but negative 43.
It was just I wanted to understand what the spread was this week because because it's getting a little bit more interesting now and people are spreading their strategies. And anybody that was Ferrari and Williams heavy, like myself, got royally shafted. But there was enough room for people to have good weeks, and I think the score spread shows that. So anyway, well done, Mr. Pit Lane Paul. So
yeah, making 10th. And for the league, we've got Kimi Häkkinen, Naiku, Mark Stappen, Factory, Tails I Win, Andy, San Gaucho F1, Manuel, and TMV Racing Reloaded, Tom, in the top 5. But I just did want to say this, Rob, while you had those things in your mind. I as I've mentioned before, I'm in 2 leagues, and in my other league, Michael's league, which is basically a bunch of F1 fantasy nerds. So, like, it's a tough league. I mean, they're really smart people in there. I finished first last week because I have a different team strategy. 239 no chips and a penalty for transfers.
Do you just keep doing the opposite of whatever you're doing in our league?
Basically. No, I had a lot of Mercedes and McLaren, and if Logan hadn't have gone out and binned it twice, the second one unable to be fixed, I would have had a really good week. But yeah, that was a good one. So I enjoy Michael's league too. But with that, we're done with fantasy.
Yes, we are. And now we will shift gears to listening to when we got together with Mark, which was, like we said, it was just brilliant. So we won't say anything more about that. Just sit back and listen to when we chatted with Mark.
Box.
Okay, I have been up to my normal habits of stalking people online. I've found this guy on a variety of different platforms, and I've hunted him down across Threads, Instagram, Twitter, or whatever we're calling it these days, and then finally LinkedIn, which we'll get onto in a minute. But anyway, it is my great pleasure to welcome to the dirty side of the track, Mark Schofield. Brilliant to have you on. Fantastic to see you, Mark.
It is fantastic to be here. I'm very excited to dive into everything, as long as it's not my legal career. As you gentlemen have mentioned, you've stalked me onto LinkedIn, which I do appreciate. I am just you guys reaching out.
Just before we jump into the quiz to get to know you, I do want to pick one little thing up on your LinkedIn account.
Okay. Yeah.
Just small world syndrome. So as I was kind of looking down the profile, I saw your college, Wesleyan, in Connecticut, which I'm extremely familiar with because my kids swim, and one of the swimming pools that they use is the 50-meter at Wesleyan. So I've been to that college like what feels like a gazillion times. So as I saw that, I was like, wow, that's kind of like small world things. So
yeah, I was at Wesleyan for, I'm dating myself right now, 95 to 99. I know we're going to get into my origin story, and I'll absolutely talk about that when it gets to the whole F1 discussion, because that's where it began. But
really,
I played college football there. So Freeman Athletic Center, where you've probably been hundreds of times, that was where I would go, for double sessions, for example, every summer when everybody else is, coming home from being out at night, and I was getting up to go to practice at, 5 a.m. I'd be walking into that building at 5:15 every morning. So that I know Freeman Athletic Center very well. There used to be a picture of me up in Freeman Athletic Center, not doing anything well. I was getting yelled at by a coach in the picture, which kind of sums up my entire college football career. I've said it before, and I feel no need to hold it back from you guys. I am entirely confident that from like 94 to 99 and particularly 97. I was the worst quarterback in all of college football, like the absolute worst quarterback. There's a statistic called advanced A&Y. It's average net yards per attempt. It's kind of one of the more advanced metrics that people are using to sort of, break down quarterback play, and they use it in the NFL and everywhere. I didn't know that could be a negative number until I calculated my own. And it's actually a negative number. So yeah, I feel confident saying that yes, I played college football, but I was the worst quarterback in all of college football my entire career.
Well, you may say that, but there were about 4 million people who wished they'd played college football, and so you're ahead of all 4 million of them. Now,
Brian, out of that 4 billion, there's probably 2 million that are like, nope. Yeah, but I don't want to do that. I'd rather not play than have those kinds of numbers.
I don't think so. Now, where will you rank in the millions of people interested in doing the 100 seconds of DRS quiz is the real question mark. And so, look at that. The question mark. I didn't see that pun coming. Probably not the first time you've heard that. So today you have the misfortune of having Rob asking the questions. He asks fast and he has an accent. So good luck to you with all of that. Rob, are you ready to start with the questions in a second here?
Yes, I am.
Mark, are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right, then we shall start in 3, 2, 1, begin.
First poster you had on your bedroom wall.
Oh, goodness. It was Tony Eason, quarterback for the New England Patriots, A485.
Favorite F1 track?
Monza, Temple of Speed.
What's your favorite cheese?
Ooh, I'm a cheese connoisseur. Manchego's probably my go-to.
Nice.
Oh, excellent. Favorite livery of all time?
Livery of McLaren, the Crow.
DRS, good or bad?
Bad but necessary. Let's put it that way.
Favorite musician or musical group?
Oh, that changes every single day. Right now, I'm in a Bruce Hornsby era. Mandolin Rain has been on repeat for like the past 2 weeks. It's kind of like a summer driving song. But you could ask me that question next week. It'll be Pearl Jam. 2 weeks from now, it could be, I don't know, Poison. Like it changes all the time. But you've got me in a Bruce Hornsby in the range kind of moment.
That's just the way it is. If you were in the pit crew, which tire would you change?
None. I can't carry those things. They're huge.
Do you have any lucky superstitions?
I don't step on cracks. It started when I was playing sports, football, baseball. Never stepped on foul lines, end zone lines before games and things like that. So I still to this day won't step on cracks.
Which driver do you wish could have a World Drivers' Championship?
I have a soft spot for Lando. He was my first exclusive, so I'll go Lando.
Okay. Would you rather be chased by 1 horse-sized duck or 10 duck-sized horses?
1 horse-sized duck. I think it would tire out quicker.
If you could swap the cars out for another type of transportation, what would you like to see them racing in?
Double-decker buses. I've seen the videos of those double-decker races, those double-decker bus races. Like, give me one of those around Monza. That'd be hilarious.
And that's time. That is time.
Around Monza.
That is great. So wait, Mark, we do this earlier than we used to do this so we can learn more about you. So Monza, huh? Monza is your favorite track.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really have a track that I don't like. I mean, even we just got out of Monaco, right? And obviously the discussion has been the race, it's boring. And I understand all that. But even Monaco, it's fun just on Saturdays and quali day, and you talk to the drivers and they'll say like, look, like down in Miami, Ricardo in his media scrum on Thursday was like, it's one of those moments where if you don't appreciate the job you have, Saturday at Monaco reminds you just how good you have it. And how lucky you are to do what you do. Logan talked about that as well. But Monza, it's just it feels like the heart and soul of F1 in many ways. It's pure speed, it's pure adrenaline. And I was talking to Abby Pullen, and I'm gonna sound so obnoxious when I do stuff like this. Oh, I was talking to this person. I apologize in advance. But talking to Abby Pullen earlier this year, she talked about all the technical sides of Monza, and she's like, "You think it's easy? Couple of corners and a bunch of straights, but it's so hard to get it right." And I just found that fascinating. And so, really, I like Shanghai. I think that's a fascinating track. Even Miami, being there, talking to people that drove it, talking to non-F1 drivers that got a chance to drive it. They'll talk to you about the technical elements of Miami and how that's become a track that drivers like to drive. But for me, it's Monza.
Yeah, Monza's great, and for me, whenever you see a Ferrari driver on the podium at Monza, they don't even have to win it, but the Tifosi go nuts, and it feels like
it feels like the heart and soul of the
yeah,
sport in a way. I mean, look, you can make, and I'm sure Rob's waiting to make the similar argument about Silverstone, and I get that too. I mean, you could go Silverstone, and you could say, look, that's also the heart of F1. I mean, you hit a driver off Silverstone off, the first turn, and you could probably hit 2 or 3 different F1 factories with it. That's how
yeah.
close they are. So you could say Silverstone too. I mean, I just like Temple of Speed, right? Like, how great is that? Like, forget it all. Just Temple of Speed. It might be the best nickname for a track.
and when they rock up with the wings that are like this, for people on the pod, I'm making a very small sign with my fingers. When the wings are tiny, it is fantastic to see them go around and around.
It's like a jet plane. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would have obviously loved you to have said Silverstone, but I'm actually not that overly patriotic because I do appreciate any good track. And what I've actually found is, and maybe we'll get to it when we. No, let's go there now. The American tracks, right?
Yep.
I think they get a hard time just because they're in America. Like if you lifted, I know maybe COTA stands out on its own because I think it's generally appreciated. That's an absolute quality track. But I would say that Miami has not put on bad races so far. It's not maybe put on the bangers, the best in the world ever, but because of all the sideshow of fake marinas and blah, 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 it kind of just gets stones thrown in it. And then everyone wanted Vegas to be a disaster. And we had the manhole covers at the beginning and they were going, oh, see, they don't know how to run races over there. And then the race was actually really good. But I don't get, and maybe it's my European brethren that are the worst culprits of this, but I don't get the F1 snobbery around pointing at the American tracks and going, they're rubbish.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like particularly Miami, right? When they first had the first race in Miami, there were some problems with the track, with the surface, with a couple of the turns, a couple of the corners, and they did a really good job. Again, I apologize in advance, but I got a chance to sit down with Tom Garfinkel, the managing partner of the Miami Grand Prix, the morning of the race, and he talked about all the improvements that they tried to make, and he talked about driving that track himself. What was really cool for me was, as somebody that does both NFL and F1. He took Jalen Waddle, Dolphins receiver, out for a couple of laps around the track a couple of days before the race. They got up to like 156 on the back straight. He was really excited about that. He talked about how some of the chicane, some of the the S section of that circuit, he can never get it right. And then he was talking to Juan Pablo Montoya about it. He's like, yeah, I struggle with that too. I mean, so I think drivers have started to appreciate Miami. As you said, Rob, COTA is a very, very impressive circuit, and they did a really good job setting that up. And whatever event is there, NASCAR, F1, whatever, all the drivers love it. It's got elevation changes. It's got some twisty parts that drivers like, some technical elements that drivers like. And then with respect to Vegas, like you said, I think there were probably some segments of the F1 fan world that were like, gosh, I hope this crashes and burns. Like, we don't need, not only do we have 3 races in the States, you've got Miami with the player introductions with LL Cool J last year. Now, look, we could say it, right? The whole thing where they got lifted up onto the podiums in Vegas for that like Thursday night introduction or whatever, or Wednesday night. Like, yes, you get the heartwarming moment where like Fernando was tapping on the glass to see Nico and they gave each other the heart sign and things like that. Like, other than that, though, I mean, Verstappen was livid. Verstappen was ready to pack it up on like Thursday night and just go sim racing in his hotel suite the entire weekend. But when the weekend ended, he said, look, this is a good race.
He sang Viva Las Vegas in his car as he came around the corners.
I mean, it was a side of Max we only see when he's on a computer screen and not, really doing his actual job, doing the job he seems to like more, which is sim racing. But the tracks are pretty good. And I think, yes, could, the American races perhaps do a better job at maybe packaging things, perhaps. And I'm curious to see what Vegas is like this season, talking to teams, talking to support staff and things like that, and not just drivers. They said, yeah, the race itself was great. It was a rough week. The time difference, the way it started with an FP1 with the Ferrari and the signs pothole thing, the manhole cover. There was a lot that they got to fix going into this year. But the same things were said about Miami 2 seasons ago. And now I think a lot of people think Miami's a good race, a good event. They eliminated the LL Cool J thing, which was, I think, appreciated by, I'd say, at least 20 people in F1, the drivers. So, yeah, I think they've done a good job. Now, when you start hearing rumblings about, oh, we're going to get a Chicago race, are we going to get a New York City race, are we going to get four? I don't know how the rest of the world will react to a fourth race in the States. I would love one. I mean, it makes the travel easier for me, but we'll see about that.
So, you talk about Vegas and you kind of highlighted a lot of the weekend aspects. I have to know the Bruce Buffer introductions for the driver parade when he got in Checo's face and yelled, Sergio, Checo, Perez. And Checo was so confused staring at him.
Yeah.
All-time highlight for Checo's career? Or where do you put that little Bruce Buffer situation? I got to know, because I know signing his contract today is a big deal. For
it's probably top 5, maybe.
Yeah, he's had a lot of wins, a lot of opportunities.
Win in Monaco, signing the contract. Today was probably up there.
But Bruce Buffer,
obviously, but I mean, it's Bruce Buffer. I mean, this is a guy that's been in the ring with, Tyson, Holyfield. I mean,
it's not even Michael Buffer. We'll take Bruce Buffer for the
take win, any Buffer. I mean, you could give me Saul Buffer to say my name walking onto a podcast. If you could get like Frank Buffer for an introduction to a show like this, that'd be tremendous.
So
okay, we got to tap out now.
Yeah, as we
back to where we were going to head, which is
we're already off. We're already in the gravel, my friends.
Oh, we're already in the gravel. This pod time has been deleted already. Anyway, you said late 90s at uni was where you got into F1. So let's go down memory lane and hear the F1 origin story.
Yeah, I mean, so we could actually go farther back than that.
Ooh,
and I'll take you fine, gentlemen, to 1946. Ray Paradiso, my grandfather, gets back from World War II. He's on the beaches in Normandy and all that good stuff. Comes down to the Boston area. In 1946, he does a bunch of things, not necessarily in this order. He gets a job, buys a house, gets married, and gets Boston Red Sox season tickets. And those season tickets were in my family until the 90s, until I was in high school. You name a Red Sox game and Red Sox lore in that sort of stretch of time, whether it's, Gabe Six and Carlton Fisk, the 76 Impossible Dream Team. Somebody in my family was there. And so growing up, I wanted to be the shortstop of the Boston Red Sox. I couldn't hit a curveball in high school to save my life, so that dream ended. I ended up, like I told you guys, playing college football. And so, I was a team sport guy, a Boston sports, team sports guy. And I go to Wesleyan University and start meeting people from around the country, people that, not out, just confined to the, say, greater Boston area, meet people around the world. And I learned the name Dale Earnhardt. Like, who's this guy? And I get introduced to NASCAR. And I learned the name Michael Schumacher. He drives for Benetton. That's a sweatshirt my mom wore. That's a team. So it was like a curiosity thing than anything else. And so that's kind of what got me into motorsport. Like, I knew the Indy 500. I was, again, being so obnoxious, talking to Zach Brown about the sort of F1 origin story and how we both knew what Indy was. And we didn't know everything else when we were sort of growing up and coming up. I didn't know what F1 was. I didn't know what NASCAR was. But, my freshman year in college, I was like exposed to those things. And then, it's 95. You get the internet, you got ESPN in my dorm room. And I'm like learning about these things for the first time. Now, I will say that I gravitated towards NASCAR first because it was just easier, right? It was easier to see it. It was easier to like sit down and watch more than just one signature, 3 or 4 feature races. And so I was a Dale Senior fan. But then I get to law school and you get to, exposed to more stuff and keeping more tabs on F1. And then finally, what really sort of moved me from, okay, this was interesting and I watched races here and there to, okay, this is something that I love, was Lewis. And seeing Lewis, because it was different. He was young, he was excited, he was just different in the sport. And so following him and his rise was really what sort of, got me hooked. It got me solidified into, okay, this is now, on par with like appointment viewing NASCAR events like Daytona and things like that. I was like, oh, I can watch this race. I'll skip this flag football game that I got. I'll skip this event that I'm not going to play golf with my buddies this week, and there's a race on that I can watch. And so, that was kind of the journey for me. I mean, the motorsport journey started with NASCAR. Schumacher and Benetton was fascinating at the time, learning about them and seeing that. And then Lewis, sort of his rise, his development, everything that he's accomplished, that's what really sort of hooked me on the sport. And I will admit there is a drive to survive element to my F1 journey, and that's this. I was already hooked and a fan of the sport, but what convinced me that maybe this is something I should cover, maybe this is something I should write about, was watching that with my wife and seeing her
Yeah.
absolutely not a fan of motorsports at all. Like I would try to get her to watch Daytona and forget it. Like 5 minutes, this is all they're doing. I'm going to go do something else. Like I'll go do anything else.
I have
than
anything
watch
better
this.
to do.
I will go grocery shopping if I have to. I do not want to sit here and watch this. But seeing her becoming interested in the sport, in the personalities, in the figures, in the drivers, and then to the point where she's like, "Oh, there's a race on? Yeah, I'll watch." Like that was what convinced me that, like, okay, that there's an audience for this, and maybe when I'm not writing about the NFL, I should probably do something about this sport.
You know, interestingly, a little different start for both of us, but around the same time. I had peaks and valleys, but then, as you say, that Drive to Survive thing, my wife watched with me as well, and she infamously, has brought magazines when we go to basketball games. We go to the NBA, and I'll end up getting seats behind the bench. She'll bring 4 magazines to read the whole thing. Won't watch a friggin' minute.
Yeah.
But we watched Drive to Survive the whole first season together, and she loved it. And so every Sunday when I'd come upstairs from the basement watching the race, she'd look at me and go, what was the order this week? Because this is 18, 19. It was always Valtteri, and it was always Max, and it was always Lewis, and it was like flip them around, and those were the 3 on the podium, usually, not always. And so she always found that funny, but she would watch with me occasionally too. So it is fascinating to kind of like validate the interest in the stories.
I know that there's often pushback on the DTS fans. You're only a fan of because of Drive to Survive, and I'm so against the idea of gatekeeping.
Yes, we are too.
Like I wouldn't be here. Like, a lot of people that do great work covering the sport, wouldn't be here for things like gatekeeping. And so I don't care how you become a fan of something. I mean, look, I'm 47. I'm at the point where, like, whatever you like, as long as it's not ketchup on scrambled eggs, like I can't get on board with that. But I'm very much a don't yuck somebody's yum person. And so if somebody became a fan of, F1 because of Drive to Survive, or because, right now, if somebody became a fan of Ferrari because of Leo Leclerc, who is absolutely positively the cutest dog I have ever seen in my life, great. Like, that's awesome. Like, the more, the merrier. The Drive to Survive phenomenon certainly brought a whole new group of fans to the sport. I think it's a great thing.
Speaking of Leo, I realized Rob, sorry, there's an important point here that's going to be very well made. I realized the other day, I know at least 3 animals of F1 drivers, because then obviously Roscoe was famous, Roscoe Hamilton, but then like Horsey Albon and all of the other cats, and I'm starting to think to myself, I might like this sport too much that I could name 3 pets.
Yeah,
I don't have any pets of my own.
Like, I mean, that's when you know that you've really sort of broken through in the fandom realm.
Yeah, there should be a phone number for me to call at the bottom of the screen.
There should be a phone number for all of us to call. I mean, let's be honest here. But yeah, when you can start naming their pets, I mean, look, but Leo is adorable. I mean, might be the most pampered dog on the planet, but good for him.
I believe you cut me off for a question about dogs, but anyway, my point was no better anyway, really, which is just that the DTS gatekeeping always reminds me of like growing up when, a certain group of people would discover a band and they loved that band, but they loved that band because they found them first. And then all of a sudden, when the band makes it and becomes cool, they suddenly hate all the kids that like that band because this is my band. I like this band. I liked them before they were cool. And you get that whole pushback of when the masses discover something, the people that were there first kind of get, I don't know what it is, jealous. I don't know what it is, but DTS felt like it brought a wave of eyeballs in, and everybody that was established wanted to kind of look at DTS and go, well, that's not a real way into the sport. There is an exam you need to sit. You need to submit your resume. We'll decide if you can come into this sport or not. You don't go watching some Netflix thing and just expect to rock up and be a fan.
As a Red Sox fan, like, there was something similar, right? Like, look, I was there at 86. I was a 10-year-old boy on the floor when that ground ball went through Bill Buckner's legs. My parents were at a watch party. My grandfather was dreaming, who still had the season tickets. That game was at Shea Stadium. He was at home watching. Like, it was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking. I remember I was a lawyer in 2003 when Aaron Boone ended Game 7 with a walk-off home run in the ALCS, and I crumpled to the floor. And so when they won in 04, I remember I was at a bar in downtown DC. There was Game 4, the World Series against the Cardinals. We were out with friends, and I told my wife, we got to get home. I have to call my grandfather. I have to be on the phone with my grandfather for the final out. And I was. It was one of the best moments of my life. But then you get that wave of what people like to call the pink hat Red Sox fans, right? That became Red Sox fans after they won in '04. I don't care how you became a Red Sox fan. If you joined because they won the World Series, you thought it was cool and you got swept up in it, awesome. I'm not going to yuck your yum on that. The more Red Sox fans, the merrier, especially when, you're going to a game in Yankee Stadium. You want more Red Sox fans around you because Yankee Stadium can be a scary and isolated place for a Red Sox fan.
Well, as a Cubs fan, thank you for Theo. Let me just say that.
You're absolutely welcome. I mean, I was on my honeymoon when he left to go to the Cubs. So yeah, I'm glad you guys got one too.
I was at a bar in South Dakota in 2016 watching Game 7 against the Indians, and I wore my jersey into work, into a very important meeting the next day. Still had beer and other things all over it, and I wouldn't take that thing off. But
no, I mean, those are the moments that make it worth it, right? Like if you're a sports fan, if you're a Ferrari fan, like if you're a Charles Leclerc fan, right? Monaco makes it all worth it. Like all the things about, the curse of Monaco and the heartbreak and the double stack of failure and the broken, gearbox in Q3 and he couldn't start on pole the next day. Seeing him win, hearing Alex Jakes, the grandstands that he saw built, like that call, like it makes it worth it. It's why we love sports. And so, if people find a way into a sport, let them enjoy it because maybe they'll have those moments too, and then pass them on to the next generation.
So, we talk about this fandom, and you obviously write for SB Nation and do other things, and you have this journalistic approach where you have some aspect of impartiality. But do you have a team? Do you have a driver? You said if you could pick someone to get the title who hasn't had it, Lando, and I get that. I would also think that would be a great one, although Charles would be a hard one for me to vote against.
Yeah.
But so, for you, how do you balance that? Like,
it's a question I get a lot, and I try to stay insanely impartial. But I always say that, look,
we can move on.
I have a soft spot for Lando. I just do because he was willing to sit down with me in April of 23 when nobody in this sort of area, this realm, knew who I was. And before I knew it, there I am on a Zoom with Lando Norris live, from Woken, and it was insane. And I've been lucky enough to talk with individual drivers since then, and I'll talk with more, and I've got more interviews lined up, and it's just been an absolutely incredible, mind-blowing journey. So I do try to stay impartial, but I will say, being down in Miami, like I was watching that race, and so the way it kind of worked in Miami was they have the press box for Hard Rock Stadium, which is where the media was sort of set up, but then there was like the spiral helix up to that area, and I watched the race from that helix, which is basically like the end of the launch straight into turn 16, then 17, 18, 19, which was a fascinating place to see it because they come out of that main straight, they're hitting 170, 180, 190, and then they slam on the brakes for that hard left. And, they all bunch up, the concertia effect and all that. And it was a very cool place. And, I know you guys know the underground F1 crew, Casey and Owen were down there and we hung out and, got to show them that place as well. And that's where they watched the race from a similar vantage point. And then what's really interesting about Miami is then they have to take golf carts to the podium celebration,
right.
which were set up right below where I was. And so I have a great video on my phone. I was just sitting there waiting for Lando and I couldn't help it. I was like screaming his name. And, here I am, supposedly impartial journalist, but the guy that gave me my first one-on-one driver exclusive is now getting his first win. And it was a pretty emotional moment for me. I mean, it was obviously a lot more emotional for Lando Norris, but I couldn't help it. I was happy for him. I mean, I try to stay impartial, but I will admit to a soft spot for Lando Norris because, he gave me that opportunity back when nobody knew who I was.
So question for you on that, because, me and Brian are 100% not journalists, but it'd just be interesting to see what your reaction is because you're sitting on a Zoom call. So, Brian and I are doing the same thing. And when that box opened up that said Valtteri was joining the call, I've been transported from slightly older than you to back to being about like 12. Go, oh my god, we're going to talk to Valtteri. And it took a little bit of time to kind of get the composure back. Not as bad. I know what Brian's going to say. Not as bad as when I totally fanboyed on Jack Villeneuve and basically couldn't speak. But you as a journalist, I could not talk at all. You as a journalist, when you're getting your first, say, access to Lando, is that still that swell of kind of the fandom thing coming through, or you got a job to do, you're a journalist and you can block all that out?
I'm somebody that I'll be completely honest. I deal with anxiety, nerves, sometimes with depression. Like, mental health is a big thing for me, and whenever we get, direct messages on threads again, I will absolutely open mine up. It's something I used to do on Twitter before Twitter became, what it is now, and it's a lot tougher of a place to navigate, but I would always have them open, and I'd always say from time to time, like, if you have something you need to talk about, whoever you are, feel free to reach out. Because I've had my own struggles with it, and I still do. And I will tell you that, the day that I spoke with Lando was at 2 p.m. Eastern time, right? Around 1:15, I was doing it in the upstairs office. Around 1:15, I went into our main bedroom and paced for about 40 minutes because I was so nervous. It's like, this is Lando Norris. And then I put on the F1 theme on repeat to try to like get myself motivated to do it. And yeah, like you said, Rob, when I see the little screen, they use WebEx, but it's the same thing. Like you see Lando Norris, or, it was the brand, head of communications, her name popped up. I'm surprised I didn't vomit. Like, that's how nervous I was. And, like I've had, 2 one-on-ones with Logan. And again, I still get nervous. 2 one-on-ones with Zach, still get nervous. 2 one-on-ones with Oscar, still get, like, you name it. I get nervous for them to the point where, like, sometimes, like the night before, I'm like restless and can't sleep. And it's just kind of the way I am. I've gotten better at it. Like, for this most recent one with Oscar, I only paced for maybe 10 minutes. And it's almost become like a routine now where, like, now I do these down here. I'll like pace back and forth and like work myself through the questions. And I've got a second monitor up anyway. So I've got like questions here, and I do them on the laptop. So like there's like 15 fail safes, right? I've got 2 recorders set as well as 1 on the computer. So there's basically 3 recorders, plus all the teams record them anyway. So I'm like covered every box. But yeah, it's more nerves than like fandom, I'd say, because there's a part of me that's just afraid I'll screw it up. And then suddenly McLaren will be like, no, we're not going to talk to that guy again. Or word will get around that like I'm not a good interviewer or something like that. And so it's more like the fear of failure than anything else, that I just don't want to, I don't want to look, foolish. It's like, so again, I'm apologies if I sound obnoxious here, but down in Miami, right? All the hospitality spaces are pretty much come as you go, right? Like Alpine, Haas, Williams. I'm like walking in and out. Mercedes, I'm walking in and out. Ferrari's like invite only. Like they're the one team that's like, look, we gotta sign off on you coming in. So I hadn't been in there all week. And then Saturday night, I get the email. Fred's gonna have a press conference for you can come in after the race. And so now, interestingly enough, Fred, Christian Horner, and Toto Wolff all had theirs at like the same exact time. So it's like, gosh, who am I going to go talk to? Who am I going to go like listen to? I was like, I hadn't been in Ferraris yet. So I was like, forget it. I want to go in here. So all I wanted to do was like sit at the back and like observe because I was like nervous. I was just nervous. I didn't want to ask Fred a question. Didn't want to stumble and sound foolish. But then, his PR handler comes and she's like, Fred's very soft-spoken. Sometimes he doesn't even want to use the microphone because that's how they do it. He has a microphone and he sits in front of you. Mercedes does it the same way. So can we all sort of move up to the front? So then I found myself in the front row. And again, I was just kind of there observing, and I did have a list of questions, but they all got asked. So I was just kind of along for the ride. But I was still nervous because I'm like, what if he just looks at me at some point and thinks, who is this guy? He's not even asking me a question. This is ridiculous. Get him out of here. I was afraid I was going to get like kicked out. So it ends. It was amazing. He's answering all these questions. I was able to write about it. But as he signs off, he looks at me, smiles, and winks. And I was like, all right, that's really cool. I mean, but I was so nervous, even though I knew I was going to ask him a question. That's how the nerves sometimes get with me.
Well, you do an amazing job. So if people aren't reading your articles and following you, they should. The recent article you did about what it takes to be a race car driver was brilliant. And you referenced some older interviews. One of them was Logan, where you used the question Rob sent through on Threads from us about,
thank you.
Yes, I had to get that shout out. And you're on our website, on our media page, a clip to that. And so, but I also agree with something you said about Lando, but I'd like to connect a couple dots that are important to me. And so I've talked about this on the pod with Rob, knows this, and some of my Lando fandom is his open and honest discussion of his mental health. And I've watched him on Good Morning or whatever the British version is, where he talks about this regularly and the partnership with Mind and the other things they've done. I always appreciate that. I'm a big proponent of being able to speak about mental health and deal with it with your community and be there for other people. And Lando seems to have really evolved in his journey, and I appreciate so very much the things he says and does that's related to it. So he's always had a fan in me. So when you say that about Lando doing that for you in terms of first interview and all those other things, I have my own reasons why I'm a big Lando fan. So when he won, I was incredibly excited. And I went upstairs and I said to my wife, it wasn't one of the three this time. It wasn't, one of the ones you expected to win.
Right.
Wasn't Max, wasn't Checo, it was Lando. And she goes, who? And I'm like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I breathed for the last 10 laps when he was bringing it home. I was convinced. I was just waiting for the F1 gods to conspire and just do something mean again, like a puncher or, he
some
just
crazy rain
in
Russia.
Oh, yeah. Or just some stupid Lando moment where she's just going to rob him again. And
like some ridiculous red flag that's like not his fault. It's at the back of the grid and suddenly you get like a restart. Yeah.
When Piastri was on an absolute mission and they came over the radio and, Oscar, you might want to kind of tone this down. Lando's winning.
Yeah, please do not bring out a red flag right now, Oscar.
So with that impartiality and the way you prepare for conversations and interviews, that aside, let's keep it, but move past it and say, all right, we are in 2024 and we're recording this just before Canada. I think we'll probably play this the week after Canada, Mark, so we can hold Canada aside. But as you look at the season, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, should we say some stuff to make it sound like we've watched Canada and we know what's going on?
I can't believe Logan won in Canada. I mean,
yes.
Wow.
Logan the Sergeant. Who saw that coming?
I was going to go for something maybe that we could just guarantee we would see, like, those groundhogs, they got a death wish. I can't believe they ran across the track again.
Bottas had such a great theme helmet for this race.
Right.
Like he always does such a great job having his partner Tiffany, but this one for Canada was just, last year's was good. This was even
the
better.
Weather was so variable. Who could have seen that coming?
I mean, wow.
So when you look at this season, the last few races have given a lot of us hope, right? That, when it's not a Red Bull track, that Max is potentially vulnerable. Like at some of the tracks where, we hadn't seen that before, and we'll hold Checo aside as it's not all of Red Bull, but it's Max who's been dominating. And so we've seen Charles, the Monaco thing, again, quali important, but then the McLaren pace seems real at times, and Ferrari's not far behind, and one day Mercedes will figure it out. And so do we have at least a constructors battle on our hand?
Absolutely.
Yes.
100%. And, I asked that question of Oscar last week, and he said, absolutely. He said neither championship drivers or constructors is done and dusted. And
drivers too?
He said drivers too. And he said, look, for me and the drivers, obviously, like something special would have to happen, but I don't think drivers is dusted either, which, that's not Mark Schofield, wannabe F1 analyst. That's Oscar Piastri, second place finisher in the Monaco Grand Prix, saying that. So I think it carries a little bit of weight. I think Will Buxton said it best after Imola. He said last year, drivers wanted another car to beat Max. This year, they want another lap. Like that's a massive difference from last year to this year. Because look, if Lando had one more lap in Imola, I think he catches him. I think that's the world we're in right now. And, I mentioned, hearing from Fred after the Miami race, and he said this. He said, look, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. McLaren's getting closer. We're putting them under pressure. Gone are the days where as long as Max held the lead into turn one, it was over. Like those
over
days
by 20 seconds.
Gone.
Yeah.
Those days are not here right now. Now, could they come back? Maybe. But everything we're hearing out of Red Bull right now is that, maybe this circuit's not going to be good for us. The fact of the matter is they have to be close to perfect now. Last season, the margin of error for them was the size of, the straights in Vegas. Like it was massive. Like,
yeah,
they could have phoned it in. Now,
Yeah, the only thing they really had to worry about last year was whether or not Max was going to get the pit stop ahead so they could
yeah,
come and put the softs on for fastest lap.
right.
And we're not, I know I made a joke about pretending we've seen Canada, but, me and Brian were there last year and we watched how far Max just drove away and we were cheering for everything else going on. And he was country mile clear. And the simulations that have come out, again, I don't know how much credibility to put into some of these, but they seemed fairly good for Monaco and Imola. It's showing that it's, you know, Wally probably places Red Bull a little bit better, but race pace doesn't. So, man, I don't want to believe because it's the hope that kills you, but it does feel like there is a definite battle on our
It
hands.
certainly feels that way. The teams feel that way. Red Bull feels like, look, they've got to be, if not perfect, close to it now to win, which is a huge difference. Brian mentioned Mercedes. I think they finally, after 3 years, might have gotten the physics right. Like they obviously got it wrong a couple of seasons ago with the zero pod design, but they might have finally figured it out just in time to see Lewis go to Ferrari. But it's probably too far back for them to make true noise. But if they could, if you got a couple of races where George and Lewis finish ahead of Checo, that could make a big dent in Red Bull's title hopes. And so I do think we have a title fight on our hands. And, can Verstappen respond? Can Red Bull? Absolutely. They're still the favorites. I mean, I think everybody that I've talked to said, yeah, they're still the favorites, but it's not like last year. We have the potential here for something extremely fascinating down the stretch here, which I think would be huge for the sport, huge for people like us. I mean, look, I won't lie. I mean, the page views peaked around August when Ricardo came back, and then over the fall when it was clear that like you're not getting anything excited. I mean,
Max
Vegas
left everybody but Checo.
Yeah, I mean, Vegas kind of crept up because people were excited about the show and things like that. But like, yeah, there was not a lot of excitement. Thankfully, I get the NFL to write about, so I don't get fired for not putting in the page clicks and things like that. But I think this year might be a little different. There might be reasons for people to tune in other than seeing how many laps Max can win by. When we get to October or November.
Do you find it interesting that with Justin Jefferson's new contract, his annual salary is 3 times the entire Packers receiving room salary, and that the 2 of the 3 highest guaranteed salaries in the NFC North, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson, and look what the Packers are doing? Oh, I'm sorry, wrong sport. Should we go back to F1?
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of noise you just said then, Brian.
We could dive into that, Brian, because I mean, believe me, I could go deep into the weeds on that.
We will do that another time, sir.
That works for me.
Yeah, we'll let Rob figure out what F1 is again for us and recenter us.
No, where I was going to go was yes, potentially we've got the battle for definitely constructors title. It'd be lovely to put stock in what Oscar is saying. If the drivers all feel it, you got to also feel, I think, that last year, not that they've given up, but we tried to make a big thing on the pod here about the race for second is so tight, and trying to make this big thing about race for second, where deep down that second's the first loser, but but this year it's credible that top step on the podium's up for grabs. And I actually, again, whether it's just me trying to kind of make myself feel this way, but you can actually almost feel it palpable this year that the drivers believe it and they know that there's not just Singapore, we can maybe win, but everything else, it's Red Bull. So actually you can see the kind of a fire lit there as well. So as you kind of look across there, put you on the spot here, where are you seeing the biggest challenger coming from for regular wins? Is it going to come from the McLaren or the Ferrari camp? I'm imagining it's probably one of those two.
Yeah, it's tough because Ferrari, they have taken a step forward, obviously with tire degradation. Like that was a problem for them. It was a problem for Haas last year as well. One of their customer teams. They seem to have gotten better there. They seem to have, I don't want to say ironed out the strategy side of things, but I think they've certainly improved in that area. So I think that has certainly helped them. I also think that like the thing with McLaren is, even when they had that late season improvement, there were still some weekends where they're like, look, these corners here,
right,
they just don't fit what we've got. The MCL 60 is just not going to be a good track for us. They feel so much better right now that, this is something Oscar said. He was like, look, gone are the days when like this track will sort of fit us and this track won't. Like, we think we can win everywhere. We think we can challenge for wins. It's not just trying to get to the podium itself. We think we can challenge for wins at every single track on the circuit this year with our car. And so I do think it's Ferrari and McLaren. I give the edge. I mean, it's tough coming out of, Monaco, and obviously with what happened in Canada. I mean, you've got to factor that in as well. I kind of give a slight edge to Ferrari just because, the quali pace is better, slightly better. The simulations you were talking about, Rob, they're a little bit ahead in quali sims. So, the closer you are to the front, better your chances are going to be. And so I think that probably gives them the edge in terms of perhaps getting more wins than the McLaren. But those are the two teams, and both of those teams right now go into every single race week and thinking, yeah, we can win. It's not just like last year. Yeah, maybe we could steal second from Checo. Now they're thinking, yeah, we can win.
And if we turn our attention to the other end of the grid, I'm going to call him friend of the show, Valtteri. Two questions around that. Do you see Sauber being able to get any kind of points this year? And secondly, do you think the most magnificent mullet on the grid is going to have a drive next year?
I do think he's going to have a drive. I'll go there first. I do think I literally, before we came on, I've got it on the whiteboard back here. I'm like working through all the permutations. I think he'll have a drive. Haas might be it. Williams might be it, but I do think he's going to be on the grid. I mean, and this is something that has come up in recent days about considerations beyond pure speed. Certainly you want somebody that's fast, but there are commercial considerations that these teams are factoring in. I've had this conversation with, friends, other fans, things like that. A lot of it's been, come up with like, well, why is this driver still got a seat? It's like, well, you pop on turn on the TV and you see them because they're extremely marketable. Like that certainly helps. That's a thing that gets factored in. And Valtteri is incredibly marketable. I mean, the ad he did for Uber down in Australia,
unbelievable,
was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Was literally one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Obviously the calendar was just incredible. And I will say, I talked to him like 3 days before that came out. I was so mad that I didn't have that because I would have asked him nothing but questions about his butt. Let's be honest.
We did. We had him not long after, and we had to ask about the calendar and signing his own cheeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, so I do think he's going to have a seat next year. I absolutely do because he's marketable. And look, you get him in a car, as he's shown in the past, he can win. So you get him in a good car, he can win. Now, can Sauber give him that car to your first point? Not right now. I think they'll get points this year. But it's going to take some things to break their way, weather or, a red flag situation or something like that. Like there have been some tracks where it's like, yeah, they've actually got some pace this week, but it's just then you had like at the start of the year when they had pit stops that were like
52 seconds,
52 seconds, 53 seconds. Like, they were in the mix, when those happened. They were either in the points or on the cusp of getting into the points when those things happened. They've sorted that out, but they had to spend so much time figuring that part out. Everybody else is developing their car. And so they're behind in the sort of in-season development game. I think they'll break through with some points, but do I think they climb out of 10th? That might be tough. I mean, I know that sounds silly because Alpine and Williams are both just 2 points ahead of them. 2 points shouldn't seem insurmountable, but given what we've seen from them, they feel like a lot right now.
Yeah. I'd love to see him. I saw a quote. I don't know if it's a quote or somebody just misreporting something, but about Valtteri not interested in just a 1-year deal just to stay in the sport. He wants.
Yeah, there was a story like I think he talked to Racing 365, but he said he wants like a multi-year deal. He wants to be somewhere where there's going to be sort of a long-term approach. And when I mentioned Haas, right? Him perhaps mentoring Ollie next year at Haas, that would be interesting to me. And Haas does seem like, look, as much as Gunther was a fascinating person and a character, and he was certainly brought a lot of people to the sport, Haas has taken a big step forward this year.
Yes.
I think they have. And I think they're on, even though they're losing Nico and, Kevin's driving like a left tackle, basically protecting Nico's blind side. Rob, we can explain that off air. It's
that'd be great.
Reference. They do seem to be moving in the right direction. Obviously, Nico's going to Sauber, and I think there's expectations that Kevin won't be there next year. Valtteri there at Haas, I think would be a good fit. That car has shown some pace, certainly showed some quality pace a lot. You guys saw it in Canada, with what Nico did on Saturday,
Yeah.
Obviously at the penalty and everything. Now they figured out the tire degradation issues. They've been a little bit better this year. So him and a Haas, VF 25 with Ollie, that could work. Maybe he goes back to Williams. But I do think he'll be on the Williams is interesting, and I think I go back and forth on what Mercedes does. What do they do? Do they just swing for the fences and say, look, Antonelli's been fast enough. We don't want to miss out because we all know the stories about them missing out on Max. There's all the stories about how Toto doesn't want to miss out on the next Max. Do they just put him into that seat? Maybe. Do they sign a stopgap and then put Antonelli to Williams? Maybe. But if they go, full speed ahead with him and put the 18-year-old next to George, there's that spot at Williams. That could work too.
And Valtteri was one of my favorite drivers when he was Williams the first time round with the kind of the Martini livery, and it was just brilliant. And
we get Valtteri and James again.
Exactly.
Yes. And you want to talk about marketability.
All the stars could align here because James Vowles talked so brilliantly about building for the future. We had Brandon on the Formula One Outsider last week, and we were talking about this, about Vowles is not really short-termism and worrying about points on the board this year or next year even, but it's like a long-term project that he wants to build towards 2026 onwards, kind of put Williams back where they used to be up at the top. Well, if you want someone that is maybe coming towards the end of their career, but knows everything inside out, has been at Williams before, can help mentor, can help push the car in the right direction. I think Valtteri at Williams is a great shout, but you're right. There's other dominoes that need to fall first.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fascinating to see it all. I do think that, the Antonelli domino is the big one that's out there because I think a lot of things will fall into place. And Lawrence Barretto opened up the sort of Ocon to Mercedes, and I've seen that other outlets have said, will Mercedes sort of give him a lifeline again, maybe keeping that seat warm for Antonelli. And I guess that's a possibility too. But I don't know. If I'm Toto and I want sort of a 1 year or 2 year seat warmer for Antonelli, I kind of want Valtteri instead.
He did some amazing things in those cars, and he was a great teammate.
Absolutely.
Full stop. So, Mark, we're going to be respectful of your time. I have one last question. Rob may have 10 more. But the question I have for you is, what's your favorite storyline you're looking forward to for the rest of 24 in F1?
Let's take the title fight and put it to the side because I think that's the big one. And let's take the driver market transfer stuff and kind of put that to the side as well because I think that's another one that those two are the easy ones. Those are sort of the low-hanging fruit type of answers. The story that I'm most interested, honestly, is F1 Academy. F1 has been fascinating to cover, and I love it. And I could give you like 6 other things I'm really excited about, like, what happens with Logan? Can he prove to James somehow that he still deserves a seat? That's going to be fascinating. Who wins 7th? I think the fight for 7th is going to be extremely fascinating as well. Do we see Williams make a surge like they sort of did last year? Can VCarb sort of hold on there? Does Alpine sort of figure things out as things seem to be falling apart over there? Like the fight for 7th, I think is going to be fascinating. But I'm fascinated by the F1 Academy.
Yeah,
I think the drivers they found are extremely talented. They're very talented. The back end of the F1 teams themselves has been impressive to see. I was hanging around in the Alpine hospitality. Patrick Mahomes was there. Abby Pullen won a race, and Bruno went bolting out of the hospitality to get to the track to see her. Like, that's the kind of support that these F1 Academy drivers are now getting from the F1 teams themselves. And so now they're getting their own sort of drive to survive, as it was announced, during the Miami Grand Prix, that Reese Witherspoon's production company is doing a similar show covering them this year, sort of the DTS style with her production company. And all those cameras were around the entire week down in Miami. And so I think that will be huge for the F1 Academy as well. And to see the success these drivers are having, not just in F1 Academy, but, whether it's, in endurance racing, like Doreen Penn, or whether it's Abby Pullen and winning an F3, like an F4, excuse me.
Yep.
They're really doing some great things right now with F1 Academy. And so obviously there's a ton of stuff in F1, the title fight, the driver movement, the battle for seventh, like, drivers trying to hold on to their seats, like all of that stuff is going to be fascinating. And, certainly a title fight is the most fascinating storyline of all. But I'm very curious to see, F1 Academy the rest of the season, seeing that grow, seeing the coverage of it grow, seeing the fan base grow as well as a result of it. I'm so excited about the future of F1 Academy.
I was so jealous when I maybe that's the wrong term. I was excited to read your interview with Abby, and it reminded me of a Dirty Sider on our Discord who got her autograph a few weeks ago, and I screwed the date up, Andy. I'll screw it up again. It was the Saturday or Sunday when she won an F4. He's going to correct me on Discord again. Sorry, Andy. But, I agree with you. There's like this, it feels like a movement is starting, and I really hope it is, because I think it's a great opportunity for so many aspects of motor racing. But I think it's great. I love that.
Representation is huge, right? Like, representation is huge, whatever industry, sport you're talking about. And so, I'll say it on a personal level. When I told my daughter, who's in 4th grade, that I was going to interview a race car driver, and she asked what his name was, and I said, her name's Abby, like, her eyes lit up. Like, and my daughter's not, into F1, like, she's not into car racing, but to hear that there was somebody that's kind of looks like her in this sport, like, her 100%. Eyes lit up. And it matters a ton.
It does, because me and Brian were talking about this. I've had the same experience with my daughter on a couple of different things. When we were talking about the F1 Academy and I was explaining to what it was, similar sort of reaction when we were saying, me and Brian were in Canada and we were cheering on the race
Megan
there.
Jokes.
We picked Megan Jilks. We picked Megan Jilks as our driver. That was great. What was also great was she's never shown any interest in this podcast ever. But when we had, I want to say last year now, when we had Antonia Rankin from, she's now part of kind of Missed Apex, but she wasn't back then. Like, she was like, that's amazing. Can't believe you've spoken to her. I'm like, we spoke to Jacques Villeneuve. And she's like, who?
Right.
You're right, because it's representation. And I think it Susie Wolf that said kind of like, the W Series kind of wasn't a failure, but it was something that needed to happen, needed to go as far as it could. It almost needed to fail or fold to allow the F1 Academy to come in and kind of do its thing. And I think it's great. It'd be great for them to extend it and have it present at more races, but you can't ask for everything on the first season. So, no, I think it's great. I did have one more question, Brian. I didn't have 10. I had one, which is kind of just
going, one, whatever you want.
Going back to F1, we talked at the big up at the front. We've talked back at the end. Now on Threads, we're quite active with the midfield pod that focus on the midfield action. In your expert opinion, what the heck's going on with Aston Martin's downgrades?
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. It's like, how sometimes like people overreact wildly and then wildly overreact in the other direction. Like last year, it felt like they blew their entire budget in preseason development, right? It's like they came out and, Horner said, it's like, oh, it's great to see 3 Red Bulls on the podium. That car was the story of the start of the season. Like, as after the first day of preseason testing finished in Bahrain, everybody was like, man, Aston Martin's got something. Like, the AMR 23 was special. Then we got to say this time last year, and it was like, they fired all the bullets. There was nothing left in the chamber. And so then going into this year, everything was, we got to get the in-season development right. I don't think they've loaded the gun yet. Like, it seems like they're just waiting until, okay. It's like that scene from Braveheart, right? Where the charge is coming and, William Wallace, hold. They're just waiting until what? I don't know. I guess November or something to like launch the in-season development.
Well, get them ready for Brazil.
They're saving it all for Interlagos. It just seems like they're stuck in cement right now. Like, it seems like there's teams that are certainly ahead of them that have done a great job in development coming into the year and certainly at the start of the season with some of their upgrades, and even teams like Alpine that, had a double-decker bus like we referred to earlier. They start to figure some things out, and Aston Martin's kind of like stuck in the middle. Like, guys, it's like that meme, right? With the stick figure with a stick. Like, come on, do something, Like, we're all waiting for Aston Martin to do something.
Mark, I'll go out on a limb. I saw a couple notes today that from areas that I give credit. I think when this gets published in 8 or 9 days' time, I don't know if Mike Crack will be team principal anymore. I'm going to go out on a big limb and say
I
that
mean,
may
yeah,
happen.
now you're hearing, Mattia might come in some sort of technical role. Like when you start bandying about potential changes like that, it's never a good sign for a team. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of similar to last year, right? When all of a sudden Alpine was making these changes, you wondered about Otmar, and then, the hammer fell on him. I don't know.
Is it Aston Martin? We'll see.
Is
We'll
it,
see.
yeah, it could be.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Mark. It's been absolutely brilliant. We probably could have burnt another hour going through this, but what we'll do is we'll save that and we'll invite you back. You see,
Yeah,
that's
we'll do it. I don't know, Texas, Vegas, whenever you guys want to do it. Now you guys have stalked me. You guys know where to find me.
Yeah,
Let's do it
LinkedIn. We
again
know how to
soon.
find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah, you can just find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message on LinkedIn.
I do have one final question.
Absolutely.
Just before
See, I
Brian
told you
closes
there'd be
this out.
10.
You
What's up,
could
10?
ask me
This
10.
this is 2. Your profile picture on Threads. What the hell is that?
Profile picture on Threads.
It looks like some like a rolling pin or something with like a cartoon face
Right.
stuck on
Okay,
it.
here's a
What is
fantastic
that?
story. So, my dear friend Michael Kist, we used to do a podcast together called the QB Scho Show. It was a Philadelphia Eagles podcast, believe it or not. I am absolutely not a Philadelphia Eagles fan. You can see the Patriots stuff over there. That podcast was obviously a little bit tough the year the Eagles beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But when we do this thing, because he's a huge history buff, and now he's all over TikTok. He's like the king of book talk. Like he has publishing companies like sending him all these huge history books for him to read and review on TikTok. We would do this thing on the show where we would have like a history reference and then like tie in a history reference to whatever we wanted to talk about. And so there was a listener who was into graphic design, and she did these like mock-ups of both Michael and I. And that's, Brian will get this Schoolhouse Rock, right? The old cartoon about how bills were made in Congress.
Yes.
That's what that is. It's a mock-up of me holding a scroll. And she did this for me like 3-4 years ago. And I thought it was one of the craziest, most brilliant things I ever saw. So I've used that as kind of like my social media profile photo for the longest time, mostly because that looks a lot better than any picture that gets taken of this mug. Let's put it that way.
Michael Kist has great taste, by the way. He followed us early on in our podcast career. I don't know how he found us or just followed us on Twitter. And so that was like, I think I called Rob that day. I'm like, somebody with a lot of followers follows us now.
Yeah. Michael Kist is a dear friend of mine. I talk to him every day. I told him I was coming on, and he was very excited.
Right.
So, yeah, he's a big fan of you guys.
One more lawyer story.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us. This was, as Rob said, absolutely brilliant, and we really do appreciate your time. And as we've already said, and we'll put it into the full show when we put it out, obviously you need to follow Mark. SB Nation, great articles, great conversations, great insights. It's an absolute pleasure having you on, sir.
It has been an absolute pleasure to be on. I can't wait to do it again. Whenever you guys want to chop it up some other time, just hit me up.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Again, that was tremendous. We really had fun. We hung up the recording and chatted with him for a little bit after that. And like we said, definitely follow Mark and read his articles. And I've never seen anyone so apologetic about talking about people he's met. Like, I'm sorry for dropping names, but you're like a journalist, bro. So it's okay.
It's literally
you're so
your
nice.
job.
You're too nice.
I know. He was awesome. Absolutely
He's
brilliant.
the best.
Okay, so next week we are previewing the Spanish Grand Prix that I will review with somebody, and you've got to try and see if you can send in some kind of like pit lane sap or no, what are you doing? You're not pit lane. You're I don't know. We'll have to come up with a name. We'll have to come up with a name for it. It's like travel sap or.
Hey, now's from over there. It's sad, Barcelona, because we got 2 years of it left, and then we're doing a street course in Madrid in 26.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones, isn't it? Where someone said to me, "We're getting rid of Barcelona," I would have gone, "Oh, about time." We never really get a good race there because they all know it too well because
they test there. Yeah.
But when they drop the bomb with, "Yeah, we get rid of it," and you're like, "Yay!" with another street track, yay! But anyway, we'll see how Madrid turns out. Maybe Madrid will be a bit Vegasy and they'll sort it out. But yeah, so. We are looking at 66 laps of a 4.7. Oh, when I wrote the notes, I used kilometers. I don't know why, so I don't know what the miles are, but probably less than 4.7.
Definitely. It's got to be somewhere around 3, right? Isn't it a 5K?
Yeah, 3
like,
point something.
It's the 5Ks on my brain from this morning.
5K's like 3.1 miles, maybe something like that.
Yes,
Anyway, let's
look
not
at
get
us
hung up
doing
on
math.
those Europeans and their kilometers. Puh. You're gonna have loads of those to deal with when you start driving around Europe.
My
Remember,
daughter thought
the speed limit is different.
I'm aware. I've been in Canada driving, but my daughter thought it was hilarious when she was with the family she's staying with now, and she's like, "We're on these little roads, and we were going 80." And we had to explain to her those are kilometers per hour, not miles per hour. So it wasn't actually 80 on these little streets.
Well, it was 80, just not in the units of measurement
Correct.
she was
not
used
in
to.
the ones that
But
matter here as Americans. We don't really
anyway,
do math.
come on, link overboard. Let's get back
Finish
to
it
Barcelona.
over. Let's do it.
So yeah, we already talked about the criticism of that it's not that fantastic 'cause the teams know it too well. They did do a big, well, I say big. They did a rejig of it last year where they got rid of the chicane at the end. So they had a non-chicane layout. It needed to get updated. They put the silly little chicane in, and they got rid of it last year, and it hoped to give more overtaking. But last year's wasn't like a banger. I went back and looked at our notes to see what we thought of it. It was all right. Quali was really wet. We had some kind of a shuffled up grid, but not shuffled enough because we had Max, Carlo, and Lando as the top 3. And the race, Max led it from beginning to end. Lando took Lewis. Well, they didn't take him out, but Lando and Lewis collided on like the first corner of the first lap, and Lando went from being in 3rd spot to having to go and get a new nose and drop right in at the back, so that screwed that up. And Max, Lewis, and George as the podium with a grand slam for Max. This isn't the one you predicted, is it?
I think it is, actually.
Is it? Is it the Spanish prediction, was it?
I think it was. Because I think he got 2 last year, and I predicted the first one, and then the second week I went fishing for another one, and I missed, and I never made the call again. Because, I tried to follow up Lightning, and I messed it up. But yeah, I enjoy this track. Like, it's not the greatest race, usually, but it's not a bad race either. And so, like, it's a good race. I'd rather take this than Hungary's or things like that, or Imola's.
And I'll go out on my little optimistic veil approach here, where last few years we've kind of had more dominating cars, so maybe it hasn't been as good racing. If Ferrari can forget about Canada and go back to what they were doing,
show up with the right cars this time.
Show up with the right car. If McLaren can bring it, Mercedes show that Montreal isn't a one-off, and Red Bull don't go back to complete form, but I'm assuming they will go back to some form. Still think this could be a really good, interesting fight for the win. I reckon. I'm not just saying it's a podium battle. I think the win could be up for cards on the cards.
But we're doing our midweek predictions again, yes?
Yeah, we will. We'll drop those midweek.
All right, so everyone can wait for those. Any other notes for you on the race upcoming?
Just the historical stats.
Go for it. And then I want to talk about what I think the track looks like, because when you think of highbrow stats.
Okay, so previous winners, and all of last season I said that this particular person probably wouldn't add another one to their list, but who knows this weekend? So with 6, it's Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher. So last year, not a chance that Hamilton was going to add another win ever. If the Montreal performance shows promise and the wing doesn't get deemed illegal, then who knows? Anyway, and then we got a raft of people with 3, Jackie Stewart, Mansell, Prost, Hakkinen, and Mr. Verstappen that could probably easily make it 4. And then a flurry with 2s, Fittipaldi, Andretti, Senna, Raikkonen, and Alonso. I'm not sure I saw enough from the Aston Martin last time out. They were much stronger in Canada and got decent points finishes, but not to be knocking on the door of a victory, I don't think. So.
And by the way, I was wrong in the Mark interview. I made a wild prediction that we would see Mike Krakow as team principal there by this time. And I'll stop making wild predictions like that.
And then we've got Ferrari head and shoulders above anyone else with 12 wins round here. Got to do the maths now and take the 2 off Mercedes because they're non-championship. So Mercedes are down with 7, McLaren have got 8, Williams have got 6, Lotus have got 6, Red Bull have got 5, and Alfa Romeo have got 1. There we go.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at the speed there of me deducting the non-championship races off that list. I should take them out.
You should take them out. That's okay. Do you ever look at the Spanish Grand Prix layout and think it looks like a crab? It just kind of looks like the sides, the way they go up, look like the pinchers pincers, whatever. And
yeah,
so,
I know
like,
I can see what you mean. I would say, let me just double check and just make sure it's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, I always thought of it as almost because I guess Spain, Toro Rosso, Red Bull, bull. I always think of it as the horns on the head
huh,
of a bull. But looking at it, I can see the crab thing as well. If you
yeah.
just put two eyes in the middle of that little bulge in the middle there, we'd kind of get the pincer thing going on.
You know what it doesn't look like? Cicadas.
Oh my gosh. You still got those going on?
Yeah, and the best part is we were in a different suburb this morning. There are none. Just 30 minutes west of here, zero.
Nice. Well, when I was sitting on the plane looking at the window, there were like loads of them just swarming all over the wing of the plane. I was like, I hope cicadas can't bring planes down. But
Bird strike, cicada style.
so yeah, this is going to be your last episode for a few weeks.
Yes, sir.
So you're going to be back for. You're going to miss Spain and Austria. Well,
Yes.
miss recording it. You're going to see them even if on delay. I guess you'll find a way.
I'll
of
watch. I'll
watching
find a
them.
way. Yeah.
You're going to be touring around Europe.
Can't wait.
It's-
We leave in a week and pick up my daughter, and we're gonna who's already there, and the four of us are gonna have a great time. And so, yes, I will be absent for the next 2 race reviews, but I'll be back for the British Grand Prix review. I'll actually be at practice, FP1 and FP2, and I can report live from the track and tell you about that. I can cross off a second F1 track, one a year at this point, and now I will miss the race. But I mean,
Hey, it still counts. Race
Yeah,
weekend
exactly.
counts. Yeah, what I was going to say is that I think a couple of things. A, you need to make sure you watch, if you can watch any of the races in a pub, go and enjoy somewhere in Europe, enjoy doing that. But you've got the Euro football championships going on at the moment as well. So you're going to
Yeah.
have to go and drink in that experience as well.
I plan on drinking lots of experiences.
So, I think I know who's joining me next week, but I have to firm that up. And he may even join me for the following week as well, but we're yet to discuss any of this. So I'm hoping it won't just be a veil monologue, because that
Oh,
would be
geez,
really
don't
bad.
do it. Don't publish one, but just by yourself. All
Ah.
7 remaining listeners will be PO'd.
Maybe I should try and do 2 voices if I can't find a second person to host.
get-
And I'll be like,
Yeah, that'll be great.
no one will notice. I can do great voices, I promise you. Like, remember my American accents for the podcast? I mean, come
Yeah,
on.
that was top notch, buddy.
Well, have a fantastic time in Europe. Although you're not going yet, you've got to make sure you send me in your predictions on Wednesday so we can cut the video together, and then people can laugh at us if we get it wrong.
I really am looking forward to the time away and the family vacation. I appreciate who I think is going to step in for me for those couple weeks, Rob. Hold down the fort. And to everybody listening, we really hope as we enter this triple header of races, you guys have a great time watching all these. I left Canada watching the Canadian race on such an optimistic high that we have competition at the top. Let's see if that continues over the next 3 races. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week.